Welcome to Saturday versus Sunday. I'm Jeff Dover. With me is John Barbin. Let's talk football.
Right, we're covering the first round of the first ever 12-team CFP playoff. And, I don't know. We just want to get started. We're not doing our typical best and worst. We're just going to cover game by game.
You've wanted home playoff games for some time. What'd you think?
Wow, that didn't work out too well.
One of the things I've written down here is that it reminds me of the first round of like the NBA playoffs, where it's like the 1 versus the 8 and it's a blowout, and so is the 2 like a lot of the rounds are like, and they were all 7+ point favorites and they all covered. So it was,
and we took all the underdogs.
We took all the underdogs. I know, it was terrible. The only thing I felt good about was the over in the Ohio State Tennessee game. We got that one, but it was and I think they could have been more competitive games. Interceptions were killers. For a lot of them, but it was I hesitate to say none of them were good games, but there were.
I'll say it. None of them were good games.
You could turn them off without worrying about missing anything, which is not the sign of a good game.
Yeah. Okay. So do we want more general thoughts or go game by
game? One more general thought. Who had the best win?
Okay. So let me see if I can qualify your question.
Sure.
Do you mean who had the win that seemed to be the most important, or do you mean performance, who overcame the strongest team, who put out the best performance? What do you mean by best?
I think all three of those things. I think
there's okay. So overall, if you want to add all of that stuff, we previously said the two teams with the most pressure were Texas and Ohio State.
Yeah.
And I would say Clemson was the only visiting team that even put up a remote fight, and it wasn't much of a fight at all. I mean, they were getting blasted 28 to what it was, 7 or 10. And it was over by the halfway through the second quarter.
Yeah.
So I suppose you could say, as far as overcoming a team that put up any fight at all, Texas had a bit of a challenge on their hand, but not really. So I would say Ohio State.
Yeah.
They showed up and just completely annihilated Tennessee from the opening snap. Those teams look like the world's different. That's the Ohio State everyone thought was possible.
You would get all season.
Well, that's the one we thought we'd get against Michigan.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I felt the same way. I was because they would talk about how many Tennessee fans were going to be at the game because of the hangover from the Michigan game. They've never had a night game at Ohio State. I thought that if Tennessee went up early, the crowd could change, but it's like the Michigan thing never happened. They came out fired up. They were, I was also going to put, if you have Texas as your number 2 best win, I was going to have Notre Dame is a close second to me, just because I think, in terms of who put up the best fight, I think Indiana put up the best fight really out of the other 3 losing teams for the most part.
And it wasn't much of a fight. Yeah.
I know that, but I mean, I thought that it's more than the Clemson or SMU. So anyway, it was it was cool to see. I think the atmosphere were fantastic for all games, for the home field playoff games. It felt like there was a lot of juice in all the stadiums. And it just wished it was a bit more competitive. But now we can do if you have any other final thoughts.
Yeah, my general thought is I wish they were more competitive. And I think I've seen some chatter about, this justifies we don't need a 12-team playoff. But then I've seen other people say, well, even in the 4-team playoff, there's been lots of blowouts in the 4-team playoff. So I don't think the blowout or the uncompetitive game thing necessarily matters. My big takeaway, general, before we get into the games, was they probably will have to reseed this.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of silly that we got 4 essentially uncompetitive games that were more or less over halfway through the second quarter, while ASU and Boise are sitting on a bye. And now Ohio State gets Oregon in the second round.
Well, and that was going to be my next point, big picture thoughts before, but looking into next week, there's 3 out of the 4 matchups. The one team's favored by more than 7 points again, so it could be.
And Ohio State's favored.
Yeah, I know, right? But so that one's the only close one. It's like Ohio State by like 2.5
I
or
know, but
something. Oregon,
the team that had the
yes.
bye is going
So
in as an underdog.
all four, same with the other three teams, right? All
Yeah.
of them that won are now
Oh yeah.
favored,
What am I
and
saying? Of course, ASU and
yeah,
Boise are underdogs, but I
right.
mean,
But
even
but again,
Oregon.
it's 7+ points too,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So it could be, if you get 2 rounds and it's mostly blowouts, I don't know I'm assuming the Ohio State Oregon game is going to be good, but because the first one was, but
And
still, it was pretty like, that would be a pretty interesting first year of the 12-team playoffs if they had sort of 2 rounds of mostly blowouts. So,
yeah, that. So the idea of reseeding, I would just assume, I don't know, but I'm assuming if ASU and Boise were playing, let's say Indiana and SMU,
huh.
you would just guess as a college football fan and understanding those rosters don't have as many 4 and 5 stars as the other teams that we ended up seeing.
Mm-hmm.
You would guess maybe those games might have been more competitive. And
Mm-hmm.
sure, whoever wins them probably gets blown out in the net, or the likelihood of them experiencing the uncompetitive blowout games we just saw might happen in the second round anyways.
Yeah.
But perhaps we would have had more entertaining first round games between teams that likely have more similar rosters as far as star talent.
Mm-hmm.
And then that could have been a more satisfying first round than watching what to me seemed like games that were over in the second quarter, all four of them.
Yeah.
And okay, sure. And there's been blowouts in the 14 playoff. And I'm sure people say, well, they're just going to get blown out in the second round, but at least we could have saw some competitive games. And instead, we saw 4 games where you could essentially turn the TV off in the second quarter, and then by the end of the game, just check the box score to see how ugly it really was.
Yeah.
And let's get to the first game then.
Sure, let's do it.
All right. And so for the Indiana Notre Dame game, the score was much closer than the game really was. That was garbage time points. And if you
felt like Notre Dame was really their defense was in control the whole game.
Yeah, that defensive line was the best unit on the field, and it just completely controlled the game. This was your classic boa constrictor.
Yes.
They ran for 200 yards. They passed for 200 yards. It was a totally balanced attack. Their defensive line, their defense in general, completely overwhelmed Indiana.
Yeah. It really felt like, because this is the second time Indiana's offense has looked poor against a great team like Ohio State, and then now with Notre Dame. And this, I mean, if I had to guess, it would say, because they've played some crappier teams.
Third time Michigan did this to them as well, but they got away with it.
That's a good point. So it's the third time against a good defense, and I guess there's something to be said about there was not many great teams on that in their schedule, and so if you get used to the offense is really clicking against this type of defense, and then when it doesn't, it's like they really didn't have much answers. Like there were some plays that worked well, but that it just really felt like Notre Dame was in the right place every time, and they had superior personnel. So
I think this is just an example of a team with better personnel.
Yeah,
it's kind of, I don't think there's any more analysis required. But Elliot brought up a good point on cover 3. He said Notre Dame could just sit in cover 2 high safeties and take away whatever Indiana's best at, which is their passing game, intermediate, specifically passing game, and just dare them to try to beat them on the ground with a light box. And across the board, Notre Dame's front 7 is just too good.
Yeah,
and they just couldn't get through it, and that was enough. Like their D line and a couple linebackers was enough, and they could play a pass stopping kind of defense, but also bottle up the run, and Indiana didn't run anywhere. So again, I think it's an example of just superior personnel. And Marcus Freeman,
it was really effective too, because it looked like none of the passes were open, and they weren't moving the ball running very well. So like it was, they had nothing early on. Yeah,
it didn't take him long to realize, oh, we got this. Freeman called a good game. His staff called a good game. They didn't shoot themselves in the foot, didn't make any real mistakes. There was, I guess, one turnover each, but I mean, I guess the Indiana turnover came at a worse spot, but it
felt like it was really bad at the time until the other 3 games happened, when there was turnovers and interceptions all over the place. So
this was this was relatively clean game on both teams. It was just to a man. Notre Dame has better players. Yeah. And they were on point. They were on assignment. They didn't make any mistakes. And this is just what you get when you have you just don't have as many high caliber players. This is how it ends. The one other criticism I heard was Signetti looked like he was coaching to not lose or to not lose badly versus go for it. And the one big one was that punt in the fourth quarter from midfield. What are you doing? You've got to go.
Yeah.
I mean, your season's over in 10 minutes anyways. You might as well go for it.
That was surprising. Yeah, especially for someone like him, which is the, Google me, I win guy, right? So there was, and it's the other thing too, just about the defense one more time, like the Rourke and over the season was like a 70% completion percentage, and it looked like nothing close to that this game. So
no. So, I mean, good for them. It's the best season in Indiana history.
Yeah.
And so that's not a bad ending for that team. And for the start of the Signetti era, half the team is JMU transfers. If he's there for the long term and he can recruit at a higher level, there's no reason to think that team's not just going to keep improving as the talent on the roster improves. But that's a 3 to 4 year project to see what happens. Because right now it's just a bunch of people who would have never been on a Notre Dame or a Penn State caliber roster. So he needs to build that up if he can.
Yeah, 10 plus wins making the playoffs. So Indiana will take that every single year. Every year.
Yep. All right. So then moving to the winner, I guess we talked a little bit too much about Indiana there. Notre Dame, do we think that type of performance with that first of all, I mean, the running back Love, this team's, it looks, now Riley Leonard's limited, but if they can, do you think they can boa constrictor their way all the way to the end? I mean, obviously they're going to run into better teams along the way here.
Right. Who's their next matchup?
That's a good question. We got to look that up. Do some live research here. Well, you can just keep talking while I'm researching.
No, I think it depends if they're playing like a Georgia type team where it's they do the same thing that they do but better. I think that'd be a problem. But if it's someone else, because I didn't think it was. Who am I forgetting?
Notre Dame is playing Georgia, so we're
that one's going to be tough, right? Because I think Georgia does the exact same thing, just a little bit better. So,
but it's Gunnar Stockton.
Oh, that's true.
He has very. I mean, regardless of how
is that for sure? Like we're sure about that with Ben. Okay,
almost positive it is. Yeah. So no matter how highly rated he is coming out of high school, he has half a start.
Yeah, so that's
half a start. He just came in. He came in halfway through a game. You can't have half a start. So and now it was a high pressure game, but and he did spark them when he came in. He kind of gave them a bit of life, but he also had some bad plays, threw a bad, and I'm not so sure he's not concussed right now because that hit was brutal on him. I mean, he might not actually feel the greatest. So I think Notre Dame is what people thought Georgia should be, is the full-on boa constrictor. And then Carson Beck has been such a Jekyll and Hyde thing all year that you couldn't really wrap your hands around what Georgia exactly was this year, but none of that even matters now because we're down to Gunnar Stockton. So I don't know what we're going to get here.
Yeah, I think that's a good juxtaposition because I think Georgia at the beginning of the year, we thought they were going to be really dominant on really both sides of the ball, and it hasn't been like that. And they've sort of settled into this identity of defense is still pretty good and the offense just don't do anything to screw it up kind of thing. And whereas Notre Dame sort of hit that stride earlier, right? Like they identified that, I think, earlier with Riley Leonard and the good defense and that stuff. And now they're really hitting on all cylinders. So, it'd be interesting. It's a good matchup.
And it seems like Stockton can run. So it's...
Yeah, I think Georgia's still heavily favored, though. So, but...
well, I mean, no, I got him at a minus 1.5 right now.
Oh, okay.
So that's essentially a pick 'em. But... it's just such a wild card. I don't know how the odds makers what can they even do here, not really knowing what to do with Stockton. But like you said, the rest of the team's good. The defense is legit, but Notre Dame's defense, I think, is legit. So, to me, that feels like a really even game, but who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay. So Penn State, then SMU.
Penn State.
Right. Because
the best thing for Penn State was Kevin Jennings. He just basically threw the game away. It was awful. The first 14 points were pick six. I mean, he was really forcing it. Here's another example of this very much looked like the moment either was too big for him or he just couldn't take the conservative play. And he was really biting off more than he could chew. I mean, it was just bad. It was really bad.
Yeah, it was the The second interception was the one that I thought was brutal because it literally just hit the guy between the numbers, and I don't know what you were thinking at that point. But yeah, they looked really uncomfortable. Like normally their offense is really attacking and from a few different places, and it just didn't seem to have it. And I think that it was a a hostile environment than Penn State, but it still was like a high noon game, and it's not as different from a night game. And I don't know, they had a bad game.
It looked really bad.
And then Penn State was, is a good enough team that if you have a bad game against them, then you're going to lose by as much as you did.
Bad. It's going to look this bad. And to a man, Penn State has more 4 and 5 star athletes. Same thing. SMU is built with a lot of transfers. Again, it's very similar to Indiana. Amazing season. They made it to the ACC championship game in their first year. They won 11 games. There's nothing, you'd take that season every year as well.
Yeah.
But as a man,
I think that in the first, if you could, that's the one game I really felt like if you could go back in time and you just don't have that bad of a start with SMU, that could have been a good game. Because I think it really game scripted out of what they wanted to do like quickly once you're down like that. But I mean, listen.
It's exactly what happened in the ACC championship game. They just went down with awful turnovers.
Early.
And they were driving on that first possession. Yeah. And there was a 4th and 2 maybe. And Jennings could have easily ran for the 2.
Yeah.
And instead he forced a pass to the guy in the end zone who just dropped it.
I guess I was just pointing is that like SMU's defense looked pretty good for the first 2 quarters too, because they got some stops. Even though Penn State went up 14-0, there was the interceptions, right? It wasn't the offense. So,
and I've heard a couple people say, I mean, you lose your mojo or your effort when you just see your offense constantly give the ball away and put you back on the field and back on the field.
It's a combination of like
super discouraging
and physically tiring because you're just making more snaps. So
so it just doesn't feel good. So that game, that was over so fast by the end of the first quarter. That was essentially unwatchable. And now, he gets the shirt. We get the shirt. I can't call him small game James anymore. He finally won what is an important game. It's a playoff game. So he's got a playoff game.
Absolutely.
Now, some people who don't want to be charitable to Franklin will say any of these teams could have beat SMU. They shouldn't have even been there. That should have been Alabama, whatever. But the point is, it was a playoff game and he won it. So got to give him something. I mean, it's not Michigan, it's not Ohio State, but it's something.
God, now when you say that, like I would have really preferred to watch Penn State, Alabama than that game.
I know, right?
That's like how it went down. But
or South Carolina.
Oh my goodness.
All kinds of teams.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing is now Penn State gets Boise State.
Yep. Over 10-point favorite, Penn State. So
they drew, I think, the best spot in this whole thing.
Well, especially when you've got the like what you said with Oregon's got Ohio State and Notre Dame's got Georgia now, so they absolutely they had a good matchup.
Yeah, and Texas getting Arizona State. Well, okay, so moving on. Where are we next? We're at Texas, right?
Yeah, Texas Clemson.
What did you think of this game?
It was good. Like it was similar to the SMU. Like it got out of hand quickly. It felt like Texas just had better players, which I don't think is the case, but I think it is. But it's like that's how it looks. Like in just over time, they were balanced enough. That's also the cleanest I've seen Ewers play in a while. Like he actually looked like he was pretty good. Like there's been some games where he sort of goes this silent, So I thought it was good. And then it's just like at the end, Clemson's not built to come back. I don't feel like from a big being down a lot. And they couldn't stop Texas' running game near the end too, because it felt like every run was going over 10 yards.
I don't think they could stop it at the beginning either. They just couldn't stop it, and that was that game.
That's what we thought. We thought Clemson's defense could hang with that one, but that's the best really Texas offense has looked in some time. So
and the run was so effective, it took pressure off Ewers. It was that was just a balanced looking attack there as well.
And their defense looked really good. A few different people sacked Klubnik.
Klubnik actually played really well. He was the quarterback that showed up the best out of all of the visiting teams, let's say.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And he's probably going to come back again, maybe. I don't know. This is a weak QB draft, though. Maybe he might go just because there's not that many good QBs that are coming out this year. It might be worth him going out.
Yeah.
But he actually showed up. This is one of the better games he's had, I think, as a starter at Clemson. Like it was obviously they weren't ever really in this game, and the final score, yeah, they kind of scored one late. Wasn't really that close. I mean, it was so out of hand at halftime. There was just no real way they were ever coming back. But he himself specifically had a good game. They also were missing Maffa, their starting running back, and they were down to using a receiver at running back who actually looked pretty good a couple of times.
Yeah,
big too, like really big.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can't really make excuses there. Everyone has injuries. Texas is running back. I don't even think that's their starting running back either, but they were just better to a man, it looked like. And if that game by halftime, there was no reason to watch that game either. So it's kind of too bad that none of these games really were that competitive. Now Texas gets Arizona State, which isn't a bad draw. They're minus 14 right now. So
yeah,
I mean, we'll see. And then moving on, Tennessee at Ohio State. What'd you think of that one?
I love the all red uniforms. I can't. I don't think I realized it was the first night game at Ohio State ever.
Really?
That's what they said, because they always play. They want to play earlier in the day, and because especially in November, they don't want to play night games when it's colder. And so and the all scarlet uniforms were really good. So
I like those.
I don't know if I've just never noticed it before, but it seems like at Ohio State home games, the other team has to walk by them, like to leave after the warm-ups, and then in Ohio State, the players are just like trash talking them as they leave. And anyway, and then Ohio State players goes to the band, and then they go in, and then before the game even starts. So it looks like Tennessee was a little overwhelmed, like from the beginning. But their offense hasn't looked that good for some time. So I don't know if people have figured it out or what, but
that's the offense everyone was expecting to see against Michigan that they couldn't. They just I just can't believe Michigan's defense was that good. I think it was something to do with the play calling, but this is the offense people thought this team could field.
Yeah,
that's the best Howard's looked all year.
Absolutely, especially that one throw to the freshman. It was like literally just over his shoulder, and because the coverage was pretty good, but it was it was a perfect throw. So
I mean, that looks like they can win it all if they play like that. And we haven't even mentioned the defense. That defense was just suffocating.
Yes.
That's just athletes all over the place. Their defensive front, I'd say, is right up there as the best in the playoffs of what's left here, the best in the country.
Yep.
You can make that argument.
Has had a good offense in the past, but that's the most pedestrian it's looked in some time.
Now, he's only played for a year so far. Now, he put in a gutty performance.
What do you think about the helmet thing? Do you see that?
Yeah,
the helmet cracked, which I didn't.
As if the guy cracks his helmet and it's not a helmet to helmet call. It's
right,
not a targeting,
or a concussion, or like, and I can't, and
it's not even an unnecessary roughness penalty. Nothing.
I think that helmets were designed like not to do that. So I'm really surprised it cracked. So
probably just the temperature. It's maybe, not really
but
designed.
I mean, still, they're really like that's not a good sign that happened.
Especially with all of the new developments in helmet tech. Yeah. This happened to Mahomes' helmet too last year.
It's really, there was one kind of helmet for a long time, and then now there's more kinds, and I can't believe that I'd be surprised if they're all equally good, but as everyone uses different ones. I think
they're still in the middle of collecting data on them, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't know.
Really sure which one, because there's about probably 4 or 5 different helmets out there at least.
So I don't think the cracked one should be get too.
Yeah, I'd probably review that one. Review what happened there. That didn't look. I mean, and we've seen way bigger hits.
Yeah, for sure.
That didn't crack a helmet, so that was weird. But anyways, he put in a gritty performance. They just look limited. They just looked like they didn't have the talent at wide receiver to really separate. Also, they were missing Sampson. It was Now I don't know if it would have mattered with that defensive front. Like, put it this way, Ohio State showed up like this was desperation. Like they were playing.
That was my take home from it. Like from the beginning, like they showed up, they were ready to play. There was no hangover from the Michigan game. The fans was no hangover from the Michigan game, which everyone thought might be a case here, and no, they were. That's the most fired up I've seen them for a game all season, I believe. So so good on Coach Day for doing that, because they were ready to play, and they executed well in offense and defense. So hats off to the coaching staff for that.
Complete avalanche on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. No, and that's what, and like you said before, that's what Ohio State's offense is was supposed to be. They've got two really good running backs and really good wide receivers.
Two amazing wide receivers.
Yeah, and a quarterback that should be able to just get the ball out in space, and
an ongoing theme with them has been the having to shuffle the deck at offensive line. Two of, I guess, their starters have been out, and they've been retooling that. But again, that type of team's got 4 and 5 star talent backing it up too. And I get that still you got to get the reps and you got to get the experience, and they have to play together as a unit. But holy smokes, that there was no problem. There was no problem in that game. They just, to a man, just better. They're just better across the board. And they used what they had.
Yeah.
They actually got the wide receivers involved, and no one could cover those guys. They were wide open all game long.
Yeah, and I think Tennessee's defense is good, and some of the DBs are quite good, but it's those Ibuka and the other guy. What's his name? The young guy,
Smith.
Yeah, they're exceptional wide receivers.
Yeah.
So the coverage was good considering who they're covering, but they were that is the best that the quarterback has looked, I think, for Ohio State for several games.
And both running backs are good. But do you remember Judkins was a complete home run hitter, game changer at Ole Miss. And here he's I don't want to say but here he's one of various home run hitting weapons.
Yeah. Well, the other running back was really good too. He was a 5-star recruit and the number one rated running back out, so like
did you hear that announcer say that Day actually asked him? He said, "Hey, this Judkins guy wants to come play with us. What do you think? Like, how do you feel about that?" And the running back said, "Nah, anything that helps the team." Just the right answer.
That's amazing.
Like, you guys are both going pro regardless, and that is the right answer.
Yeah.
And so you add a home run hitter to a bunch of home run hitters, and the O line, however they constructed it, held up. And if that's what this team can produce, they can for sure win it all. If that's what this team can produce. But holy smokes, they're up against the toughest challenge in the second round.
Yeah.
So we'll see what that rematch looks like. I mean, what are our other takeaway comments here about how the weekend went?
That was a lot, I think we covered most of it. We had the general comments. We broke down each game, and then I think I was really struck by the interceptions. Like, Rourke does not throw interceptions. Klubnik does not throw that many interceptions, and the SMU guy and they did, and some of them were bad. And so I don't know if that's defense is really good, or the pressure getting to you, or you're trying to force something to happen because you're in the playoffs. I don't know what it was, but I was surprised to see the number of turnovers that were there. And when you're playing a good team, then it's going to be over fast. So.
Yep. And they were all over fast. I mean, besides the winning team's fans, none of these games were particularly interesting to watch definitely not past half, and barely past the second quarter.
No, but you're right though. That was hats off to, if you're a Ohio State fan, Penn State fan, you have a home playoff game, first night game, it's not like Notre Dame has a lot of night games either. So it's that would have been great. That would have been great for those, fans to all four of them cover.
And all the crowds were bananas at all of them.
Yes.
I actually, I saw, one of the other podcasts I was watching said there was actually some chatter that the crowds wouldn't be good at these. I don't understand that take. Somebody somewhere had that take. Other
than the Ohio State one, where it was going to be 70-30 Ohio State, Tennessee fans. And if the Tennessee went up early, I could see that crowd.
Was there really 30,000 Tennessee fans there? That place holds 100. I don't believe that for a second.
I mean, it was that's what Herb Street said, but Fowler sort of said, are you sure? But I mean, that's the only thing that maybe, but no, they were all into it. It's their college fans are great. And they'll support, and it makes a difference when you're loud. So
yeah. I don't know if there's really a way out of this, for more competitive games. I can see how. I mean, this
year too. I don't want to get too. It's a small sample size. But I do think a couple of those games, if they started differently, would have maybe felt closer. But
but across the board, it was I mean, it seemed quite obvious right away that there was a better team on the field, and the other team just didn't have what it.
I know
what it was
you texted
take.
me that, and like during the 3 different games, you're like, you don't have to watch this.
You don't have to watch any of these. Go find something else to do.
I know.
I mean, it's just, oh boy. Yeah, I can see the arguments both directions that there's no reason to ever expand the playoffs if this is how bad the opening round could look.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you going to do? Would you go to 16, just more blowouts? And then other people say we got blowouts with 4, so it doesn't matter where you go. I hope that that's not the case. I've seen people say doesn't matter how many. There's only like 3 or 4 teams that can win the national title, but that's a bummer. Like we kind of want some hope that it's not just Ohio State, Georgia, Bama, and I don't know. I don't know who else, but just
we're college fans. We're college football fans, and even for us, when it was always Bama, always Clemson, like in that stretch, like at that point, even we were like, oh, it'd be great to see someone else in there, So
now, with that said, good games are good games.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, that's to your point. It's kind of. There's that 5-star ratio thing that's pretty accurate at predicting the national championship. And there's not many teams that fit in that mold, right? So
they have to be above a certain number of 4 and 5 stars, and those are the only ones that can prove to win it. So I don't know. Hopefully we get better looking games this coming week. Are we going to pick these now, or are we going to pick them?
No,
different show?
We're going to
pick them on a different show. All right. Well, that's our quick take on the first round of this college football playoffs, and join us for our next episodes where we cover.
We're going to review the NFL this week.
The NFL,
and then we'll have a preview one
and a preview of of the coming next week in college. And I think this week the NFL is going to beat college.
Oh,
because for no other reason than none of these games are competitive. And I'm just guessing. I haven't watched any NFL games yet. I'm just guessing we're going to get more than 4 competitive games.
Gotcha. Okay, we'll see.
We'll see. All right, we'll catch you later.